So very recently, Gravy and s2j got into some Twitter beef. s2j is citing that the 20GX Florida Falcons play really quote unquote lame, and that includes Wizrobe, Gatsu, and Gravy. And I think his sentiment came out of the Falcon round robin, where Wizrobe chain grabbed everybody to death, whereas everybody else was styling, and he felt like he would have to play like a total quote unquote lameo. And so amongst this, Gravy responded saying, "I look up to you, s2j, and you do this to us. Why?" So just keep in mind, for the greater audience, it's just fun banter. They don't actually hate each other. I believe s2j and Gatsu talked a lot before at Sandstorm. s2j and Wizzy, I believe, talked from time to time, and s2j did not call them bad. He just called them lame. So there is, mutual respect, and s2j would call Wizzy the best Falcon dittoer, no questions asked. But there are some greater philosophical questions that come out of it with regards to how people play Melee. A lot of people view Melee as this jazz. If you were to talk in terms of musical analogies, that this is like jazz. You have freedom of expression to throughout your combo game and the move selection and your movement. It feels free flowing, and that's what appealed to a lot of people for Melee. But the way that people like Gravy look at it, not to say that one is better than the other. Gravy, Wizzy, Mutaking, the people that are quote unquote looking for an optimal play, are looking at Melee in terms of more of a classical type of view, where there's a set structure that you have to do. And in terms of improvement and how we evaluate skill, both are applicable. I mean, because you can get some really cool custom combos that are based on just pure intuition and feel. And I believe that intuition in the game is a really important skill to have. But knowing the optimal play when you have your opponent in a checkmate situation is also very important. And I think a lot of people kind of are scared of this optimal play, but subconsciously we naturally play optimally. If you look, like, why do Sheiks down throw fair? Why do Falcons do up throw into up air into knee? These are very elementary combos that we see all the time that we'd call optimal. Why does Mango do drill into shine into up smash for a kill? These are all optimal plays. So these aren't mutually exclusive. You can play stylistically, but in order to get to a certain skill level, you need to know your fundamentals. This also highlights, philosophically, how West Coast players in general versus how East Coast players in general look at the game. Hugo articulates this pretty well in a Facebook post, that this is a classic West Coast versus East Coast mindset. PPMD also mentions this in the documentary, whereas East Coast players tend to really like to dissect the game and break it down and see what they can abuse within the frame data and hitboxes. West Coast players are more interested in manipulating their player, making these fancy outplays, and just feeling the sense of dominance over their opponents. Like, oh, I got you to roll, so I'm going to stomp into knee you and look really cool. I'm not saying that all West Coast players are like that. I'm not saying that all East Coast players like to look for the optimal gameplay with absolutely no reads. So, but just generally speaking, you look at history. Ken is a very big player that goes on reads and intuition. He would not understand. He doesn't explain things in percentages. He doesn't say, like, this works at 34%. That's not Ken. Ken is like, I feel like you're gonna roll, or I feel like you're gonna shield. So if you're gonna shield, I'm gonna grab you. If I feel like you're gonna jump out of your shield, I'm gonna throw a forward smash on your shield. That's how Ken plays. Mutaking back in the old days would go, well, you can forward air at 25%, and it'll tip right here, and you can go into forward air into nair if they do this, or you can spike them if they do that. That's the Mutaking philosophy. You can see this in other players. So Mango and Mutaking later on was like the classic 07 example, where Mutaking seemed to have this very optimal gameplay in his Marth. It seemed like it was impenetrable, whereas Mango won with Puff in these really exciting matches because Mango would get these hard reads, manipulate Mutaking's spacing, and force him to make really tough decisions. And so we see these two styles at hand all the time. Another point of emphasis to make is that when you look at it, I think West Coast players tend to look at more of the macro mid-screen game where you have skirmishes, the options are still very vast. And there isn't really a quote unquote optimal play because you can go to a variety of options. And if you choose one option that's quote unquote optimal, well, your opponent can come up with a game plan to counter your optimal play. And so there technically isn't optimal play in the mid-screen game. There are set kind of decision trees you can go into, but certain decision trees beat other decision trees. So you get into this meta play calling thing. That's why in basketball you don't see a team do pick and roll every time. Sometimes you do a high screen. Sometimes they run balls through different players because they have different decision trees that they need to do before they can score a point or before the defenses catch up. Whereas East Coast players, they really like to look at it in the micro point of scale, like in this exact situation, you have 6 frames, I'm at frame advantage, so therefore I can do this. Or I have this up down throw tech chase on you, I have this 10 frame window to react, so I can do down throw into up throw into knee. That's a very good way to explain East Coast mindset. Whereas West Coast, they like to say mid-screen, they like to look for outplays where both players still have options. It's not to say that West Coast players are willingly going to pick the worst option and just get exploited, but they like to play in positions where there are multiple options available for both players, and they want to outplay you, they want to outread you, and they want to assume, okay, you're gonna do these options before you do it, and I'm gonna anticipate it and dominate you. And so both are needed, and it's not to say, I think one misconception that people have is that with 20GX, they only look at tech chasing, they only look at this, and they can't do anything else well. And I think that's a huge farce. I don't believe that to be true. And flip side, if you look at s2j, it's not like s2j doesn't know what to do on a throw. If you watch him play, and you tell him to say, like, which throw do you do in this situation, and you give him some variables, he's going to pick the right choice 90 to 95% of the time. It's not to say that he doesn't know this knowledge. Maybe Gravy knows a little bit more because he's got it down to, like, little percentages and platforms. But you ask s2j these same questions, 90 to 95% of the time, he's probably going to be correct in what to do and what grab to do to continue a combo. It's just the point of emphasis on where they focus on are different. s2j wants to refine his neutral game. He wants to understand how does he get his openings, how does he apply pressure to these skirmish situations. That's his point of emphasis, is to improve that. He can work on his edge guarding though, just little shots to him, and I think he's working on that. The 20GX guys, it's not to say that they go entirely readless. Wizrobe would not be as good as he is if he were to just play safe all the time, if he relied on just focusing on the little itty-bitty micro aspects of the game. His zoning is really good. He actually reads a lot. If you watch him against the Moon, he gets so many raw grabs, and that's because he knows that he's conditioned the Moon into certain things. So it's not like Wizrobe is this highly like robotic player. He makes adaptations, and so you need both the macro and the micro game. And I feel like both groups, quote unquote, do what the opposite party is doing. So s2j does know like the percentages to a loose degree. The 20GX guys do make reads and they do make exciting plays, maybe not so much in the Falcon Ditto. You have to get reads actually in order to win the neutral game, because as Falcon, like if you play against Fox, Falco, and you just try to play safe and you don't approach, you eventually run out of space because Fox and Falco are better characters, and if both players are equal, and both players just try to play safe and they play their cards right, the Fox and Falco player are going to win. And it's inevitable. And that's why you have to get reads if you're the worst character. And you know it's important. It's not. I mean, I think there's like kind of an old school mindset where they absolutely refuse to look at the percentages and look for the right play or look for the right punish, and that's why their punish game sucks. My punish game sucks in that regards, and it's important that you understand that to a certain point, where if you have your opponent within like 2 to 3 steps of checkmate, you need to understand what it takes to get to that checkmate position. And I think a lot of old school players aren't really good at that. New school players that like really like to focus on the micro game, I think their issue is, let's say like you're 8 steps away from checkmate and the board isn't as limited to that. They have a hard time getting in because they're playing too safe. They're approaching wrong from mid-screen, and they're making just really big fundamental errors. I guess fighting game fundamentals, footsies, mid-screen zoning, cornering your opponent, pressuring your opponent. These aren't things that you just learn from just playing the micro game 100% of the time. And so overall, it's an interesting classical dilemma, and this is something that's been here since the beginning of Melee, with Ken and his intuitive West Coast style does read heavy versus people who really like to break down the game. And it's going to continue to happen. It's just another way to look at the game. Different perspectives are always good.